Hello, everyone. I am so excited to have a second episode of Come As You Are. And today I get to host Andi Long from the Bloom Foundation. Andi is the executive director and founder, and this is a particularly special mission because she's working on a topic that's near and dear to our hearts as well. And that's why we've decided to have this conversation because in the few times that Andi and I have met, we have really connected on this topic in particular and have seen how it can transcend from bullying in the cyberspace or in the schoolyard all the way to the workplace. But I don't need to talk anymore. I would really want to hear from Andi and have her share her story with all of you. So, without further ado, Andi, tell us a little bit more about you and Bloom and why it's here.
Yes, thank you. Thanks so much for that intro. I appreciate all of that. So yeah, I'm happy to share. So Bloom Foundation, I started this. Actually, the seeds of it started when I was in middle school, when I was kind of learning and navigating the internet at the time too. That's when dial-up started, and so I was navigating the internet. But there's a website called School Scandals, and that's where people could write things about each other. Giving middle school students the power to do that, I don't know. Not maybe the best, but I remember someone creating a username, Andy's a loser, and just writing terrible things about me online. And it was so confusing to navigate as a middle school student. And I remember noticing kind of a gap of resources just for myself. There were like suicide kind of tip hotlines, and then also tips and resources, but they were in information sheets. And I think I was looking for something that would go deeper and also speak to like the emotional pain or just more of that. And so even at a young age, I kind of noticed that gap. But then it happened again at another school and a different website. It was called Juicy Campus, and same concept though. People were super mean online, and that caused me to fall into a little bit of depression, isolation, and just feeling really bad about myself and my sense of self-worth. And so that was very difficult to go through. And then I heard a quote and it said they tried to bury us, but they didn't know that we are seeds. And then that really gave me an image of growing through adversity and, going through those challenging things so that you can grow through it, and then eventually help other people too. So a few years later after that, I decided to start Bloom Foundation to exist as what I needed when I was younger, and to provide that support that I was looking for. So I really believe in like growing together and creating safe spaces where we can lean on each other and grow together. So that's a little bit of the backstory of like why we exist and what led me to start Bloom Foundation. So, yeah.
Well, I know personally, I could have certainly used what you've created growing up, and I'm sure you hear that a lot, right? Because especially now with the internet, Facebook was founded when I was in college.
Yes.
You experienced social media in middle school. So many children are now experiencing it, what, in elementary school or, very, very early. The suicide rate is really high for young individuals as well. And I'm
Yes.
sure you can speak to that. If you haven't read all of Andy's story, please go to hellobloom.org and check it out. There's more detail there. It's beautiful. I read it this week and I love what you're doing. And I'm really sorry you went through that. You talked about the depression, the isolation, the anxiety, and those feelings aren't something that you can get over just like right away.
Right.
Um, that's a that's a multi-month, probably multi-year process. Can you talk a little bit about what that feels like? Because I have a feeling there's a tie-in there between what happens in a workplace harassment incident and also what happens to a young person when they're experiencing bullying in school.
Yes. Yeah. I think it would be helpful to maybe go through a little bit of the process of our curriculum workbook. And I
Let's
will
do it.
say, I've pulled on it, or like I've needed to kind of pull it out and go through it just as an adult because you're right. I think these concepts they're best taught young, but then we can rely on them as we're older too. So the first one is it's labeled being buried, but that's when you get to address like those negative things that have been said about you and like those negative things that have maybe made an impact. Because I think, so often we just carry those with us. unnecessarily. They're not even ours to own. So that's really addressing how can you write it down, see it, address it, because so it's not just in your mind. And I think that's a really important piece. So that's what we start with. And I would really say, you don't even need the curriculum workbook. You can do that on a piece of paper if you're feeling overwhelmed or maybe being brought down by what other people are saying about you or things like that. So that's step one. Step two is then looking forward. So knowing that this time will pass, knowing and giving perspective because when you're in middle school, you think that that's like, your world, right? Like this is it. But I think it's important to remind them like 7 years ago, where were you? You were in a totally different space, right? And you've grown so much. 7 years from now, where will you be? And what growth will you experience? And it's just such a helpful way to see your life as a bigger picture. After that, we do rising and budding. So that's just looking at your coping skills and strategies. What are the things that you can focus on that you love to do that are healthy for you? Everybody has unique ones too, and it's so fun. But like, how can you calendar that out so that you're making sure to spend time on those things too? And then spreading seeds is the next one. So this is about kindness and choosing kindness, even though you're not receiving kindness, because we always have that choice. If you look in your community, there's so much you can do. And I know you're big on that too, is like highlighting community partners and, great things that other people are doing. But when you get involved with that, you just feel so much better, right? And you get that sense of community too. I know when I was going through bullying, one thing that really helped was just starting to volunteer on the weekends, on Saturdays, and going to just do a little bit that I could to make a little difference in the world. But those things really add up. And then after spreading seeds, it's being watered. So that's like going back to your birth and who you are, and maybe asking a few friends like what their feedback is of you. Because again, if you're getting, negative, not just critical feedback, but just like negative things from other people, it's important to kind of be reminded of who you are from the people who care about you, and like go back to like knowing that you're not alone, and like what do your parents say about you, or a coach, or friends. So but like mixing up with like your negative self-talk, which is a big thing that happens, with truth about what other people are saying about you. And then also thinking about what you like about yourself. So in that section, we have you write down like 10 reasons to love yourself. And it's interesting because that's a piece that a lot of people struggle with. They're like, wait, I don't even know like 2 or 3. And it's interesting because I think that we can think of the things we don't like about ourselves pretty easily, but when we're challenged to think about what we like about ourselves, it can actually take a longer time. And then after being watered is growing strong, and that's choosing empathy and digging deeper to why someone might be doing what they're doing, choosing compassion and forgiveness if we can, to like let go and release of that too. So I think, and then the last one, sorry, it's a lot. Feel free
I
to
love
stop.
it.
But
No, don't. Keep going.
okay, the last one is turning your painful experience into something beautiful, and you can give back. What would you tell your younger self, and how can you kind of turn around and say, I've been through this really painful experience, but this is what I've gained from it or learned, and then teaching that to someone else is kind of the final piece of it. So yes, that's a little recap and kind of the journey.
Yeah, I love it because we started with the question of like how does that feel, and like the icky feelings that are associated with it. And I think sometimes we do spend a lot of time there. A lot of our focus recently has been on mental health.
Yes.
And so spending some time with those thoughts. But so much of the roadmap is about growth, self-love,
Yes.
self-worth, helping others, kindness, empathy, all of
Yes.
these beautiful pieces. And I love that you took it through the life cycle of a seed or a flower or a tree or whatever that is.
Right.
and everybody's a little bit different and unique in that way. I'm curious, since you've started Bloom and overcome so much, I know your younger self would be incredibly proud to see this right now. Um, have you experienced bullying since, and has your approach been different to it?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. The most recent example I can think of, and it's not, I want to preface by it's not bullying per se, but it's fresh on my mind, is I posted an Instagram photo and then I got a DM that was asking me if I was pregnant, but I was not. And this is not a bullying incident, but I was reminded of, putting yourself out there a little bit, but then like, an unexpected question. So actually something that helped me with that was this ABC framework. A is activating event. So just like the
Mm,
objective situation. B is your belief system. And then C is a consequential emotion or feeling that comes after that. So that's typically the kind of, again, like the journey that you just kind of go through is there's an activating event and then you think about what you believe about it and then you have an emotion or feeling. And so by being aware of that, I was able to kind of see it for what it was, right? And even now I'm talking about it, I'm not like, and it was so, I felt so bad. It was a nice question. And then the D and the E is to dispute and then replace it with an
mm,
effective belief. So after that, I was able to just, with the belief, like ask myself, what do I really believe about this? And then what's an effective belief that I can replace, the first belief that I had, which I'll be honest was like, right, like, does my body really look like it's changed a lot? Do other people think this about me? Yeah. So, am I gaining weight? Like, so those kinds of questions. But then once I was able to replace that, I really thought, I thought about it, and this person has not seen me in real life since 2014, and my body has changed, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with me. So yeah, that's an example that I wanted to give because that came to mind, and I also appreciated how I was learning that framework and was able to apply it too. So yes.
yeah, no, that's beautiful because it's so seamless and you were able to quickly just go, okay, let's walk through these steps and figure it out instead of, I mean, we all will still have those questions, right? Even if
Right.
we've healed from an experience or we're in a good spot, we're still going to have those moments of like, do I look a specific way to somebody? Do I, do these things? But I think it's important that you pointed out A, that you had that, and then B, no, I was able to like refocus what I was feeling and be present in the moment. And I think it's perfect for anybody at any age. I know that you're focusing on younger girls, but I would use that today. You just used it. And I think other people can use that in their daily life as well, because let's be honest, we're all going through a lot right now. We're
Yep.
heading into holiday season. That's
Right.
probably not going to change.
Right.
And we've been through a lot in the past 2 years. So there's gonna be a lot of belief systems. And then I love the last bit, the effective belief,
Mhm.
or like tell me again, effective belief. Am I saying it right?
Mhm. Mhm. I
Um,
know. I had to reference
yeah,
it.
I know. Like now I'm like, okay, I need to write these
Yeah.
down also. But I love that you reframe it at the end because it's like, this is what I've been feeling, but this is what's actually true. And I
Yeah.
think that's so important in it. So I want to make sure that we do spend a little bit of time talking about how bullying and harassment can feel very similar, knowing that they're very different, but how that they can keep going. Um, because as you mentioned and as I've experienced, it can continue throughout life. So it's not just about making sure that we're educating ourselves and others on kindness, empathy, things like that. It's also about making sure that we call out that behavior too.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so yeah, so I love that your organization exists in that manner. And I know you have other partners that call this out as well.
Mhm.
Um, are there any campaigns or things that we can point folks to when they're looking for resources on bullying, either for themselves, others, etc.?
Absolutely. The big ones are Pacers and then also stopbullying.gov. Um, but I think it's so important. As you were talking, I was thinking it's so important to be our own advocate and to learn that that's okay and to practice it. But yeah, going back to your resources question, there's definitely resources out there, the ones I just mentioned. But I know, I think, yeah, I think it's like conversations like this too. I think we really have to just be there for one another and almost practice courage, if you will. Like it takes a lot to call it out. But I think that if you have a strong person next to you, um, that's where it happens, and that's where you feel like you're not alone, and you have the courage to go. That's kind of coming to mind as well. It's like looking around you and seeing like what kind of support system you can build and lean on. While there are also wonderful resources, I think it just starts from that, like those conversations and having those people.
It's almost like growing your garden, right?
Yes, it is.
If we're
Exactly.
sticking back with the theme.
Yeah, yeah, we really do grow better together, and I think of wildflowers, they grow in like groups, and I think that's where it happens. And I think it's wonderful what you're doing as well is creating that community and just building one another up in that space. Because I'll be on like when I started Bloom, I know that there were resources, but I think that the power comes from like the living it out together. So I think it's great what you're doing too. Yes.
Oh, I think that's the message. I think that's how we end because it's not just about the fact that you can walk through a framework. It's about knowing that you have somebody on the other side of it that you can work through it like we just did.
Exactly, exactly. Yes, and
Now,
one thing I'll say too is I shared this with a friend of mine, and it's so funny. She was like, she messaged me a week later and said, "No way!" Like the same exact thing happened to her, where someone asked
wow.
what she was expecting, and she was like, "I walked through the framework, and it helped me so much." And it was a cool pass along moment. But exactly, like that's kind of like the picture too. Is like you pass it along and you grow together. So yes.
I love that. I love that. So, you and I are both champions of community, and we
Mhm.
love being able to be out there and be a resource for others.
Right.
I know that people know they can get a hold of me. How can people get a hold of you and support Bloom in the process? Because Bloom is also a 501(c)(3) organization, so people can make donations to you as well.
Yes, yes, thank you. Absolutely. We are a 501(c)(3) organization. Our website, as you mentioned, is probably the best place to go. So it's hellobloom.org. We're also on Instagram, and that handle is Bloom Foundation. And we post a lot of great quotes there too, inspirational things there. So would love for you to follow along there. And then you can also make a donation at hellobloom.org/donate. So thank you.
Amazing. Yes, of course. And in the spirit of what we just talked about, I would love it if you could tell us one thing that you love about yourself.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. I think also in the spirit of the conversation, courage, I think even coming on things like this can be scary, but just the courage to show up and share your story, which is great that you're doing this come as you are, even if you are scared, right? And
Yes.
have courage and go for it. But yes, thank you for
I'm
asking that question.
of course, I'm also scared, and I do happen to love that about you too. So I'm glad that you called that out. Andy, thank you so much for spending time with me today. I loved getting to know you a little bit more. We've had the pleasure a couple of times, but this one made my heart sing a little bit more. So thank you for the time, and I'm sure it won't be the last.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Bye, Andy.
Bye.